I'm getting the real last slot, the graveyard slot at the end of this. And I know I'm keeping you from beer and I think sunshine, maybe cocktails, so appreciate you all being here. My name is Liisa Caliendo. I'm from Medscape, and I actually think it is appropriate for me to speak after hearing all of these presentations. What I want to talk about is how we are putting into practice a lot of the innovations that we've been hearing about this week, and how we really are making our mission to keep the physician experience at the center of all of that. So there are three things I want you all to take away from this. One is key principles of HCP engagement. That's what we do as a publisher. That's our bread and butter, is getting them to keep coming back. So I want to share a little bit of those insights with you all. And then what for you all to look at when you're considering digital partnerships, whether it be a company like Medscape or somewhere else, and then how to really utilize those channels to facilitate behavior change. And then again, while keeping the physician at the center of it all and really considering their experience and what they need. So I think most of you have heard of Medscape for 27 years. We've been a publisher and the leading destination of online information for HCPs. Our mission, as many of you all share our mission, is to improve the lives of patients. We do that by making sure that they have all the information that they need in order to treat their patients in the most effective manner at their fingertips. And it's not just enough to have it at their fingertips and have the latest information. We need to give it to them in a way that's highly relevant and easy to read. We are ranked the #1 destination for European physicians, and what we've really done to make that happen is make sure that any physician who comes to our site learns something new, whether they're the leading cardiologist in the world or whether they are in a rural village. And that's also helping us achieve our objective of making sure that there's health equity, at least in access to the latest healthcare information. So I think, we are constantly keeping the core of that in mind whenever we're creating something online, is that access to this information from our clients or from us can potentially change someone's life or save it. So being the largest destination, we have 6.5 million physicians, 13 million HCPs. It's been hard to grow the network that much. It's even harder to keep them coming back every day, right? So part of how we keep them coming back is making sure that we're constantly using a lot of these innovative techniques that we've been hearing about this week. Not only in how we deliver that program to our members, but in how we deliver that to physicians as well. So the World Economic Forum, Health Forum, said that there has been $44 billion invested into healthcare innovation in just the past year alone. That's an incredible amount. That's a lot of innovation. There's a lot going on, and things are moving pretty fast. How do you make sure that you use the innovation, but also don't misuse it, right? Innovation for the sake of innovation can sometimes take us backwards. So how do we kind of keep all of that in mind, but still try and stay on top of things? And really, we try and keep it to these core principles. Make it easy to get to. Sounds intuitive, it is, but it needs to be easy to find. It needs to be easy to get to once they get to our destination. It needs to be engaging. That is harder to achieve than almost anything, right? It can't just be accurate. It needs to be engaging, and they want to read it. It needs to be easy to digest. Not everyone is trained as an epidemiologist to read highly clinical content, and even though they're doctors, sitting down and focusing on highly clinical content, I think we all know they don't have a lot of time, and we'll go through that in a little bit. So it needs to be easy to digest. It also needs to be surfaced to them in an unobtrusive way. We can't just keep shoving things in their faces and expecting that that's going to create the change that we're looking for. So how do you do this in a respectful but meaningful way to really help them learn and drive that behavior change that we're all looking for? So these are the basic principles that I'm going to talk about today. And since it is the end of the day, I'm going to try and go a little bit fast, but I am happy to talk to anyone later about going into any of these in more detail. But at the core of it, you really want to understand your audience, understand who you're talking to, right? Before we go into meetings, we usually look up the person we're going to meet and find out whatever we can about them. We should be treating the doctors that we're trying to reach online no differently. We really should understand them. Not only that, but let's identify them. Are we talking to the right people, right? And how do we find them? We also want to utilize basic principles of learning. I'll go through that again, but it can't just be one and done. It can't just be showing the same thing over and over and over again. There has to be a cadence, and there has to be that right mix in there to really drive that knowledge absorption. We also need to bring the content to them. We can't just say, come over here to everyone and expect that they'll follow, right? There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people trying to get their eyes on content. How do you get them to you? That's a really difficult thing to do. So let's go to them. Let's make it easy again for them. And we want to make sure we tell a consistent story. If we're not telling a consistent story, sometimes the overall theme can get lost. It can get remembered incorrectly. It may not have the effect that we want it to have. And again, it has to be engaging. It has to be interesting. So let's talk about understanding our audience first. As a publisher, we do several surveys with our physicians around the world every year. We do lifestyle reports, we do depression reports, we do salary reports. Just want to highlight a couple of things that stand out to me as we're talking about, how to reach out to physicians and the fact that they're busy. I think it's interesting. In the UK, 60% of doctors are saying they're actually working the same or more hours since COVID restrictions have been lifted. I would have thought it would have been less. But with all those multitude of factors that are coming together, retirements, people leaving the profession altogether, a lot of them are actually working the same or more hours. When you look at by specialty, what kind of hours physicians are working, it starts, like the lowest end of the tier is 45 hours a week. That's the lowest end. The highest is over 60, depending on specialty and country. So you're talking about doctors are working a lot, right? We also do a report that looks at kind of their mindset, right? And the title of that report, believe it or not, is I Cry, But No One Cares. And within that report, 53% report that they're burned out. Women are disproportionately reporting that they're burned out more than men. And there's some data in there, if you all feel like looking at it, that can really drive some insight into who they're talking to about it. They're not talking to people about it, right? It's the same thing of why people sometimes in the military don't go telling people that they're having suicidal thoughts. Doctors are under that same kind of pressure not to share that kind of information. And so how are we supposed to approach these people in a respectful way when that's kind of how they're feeling at the moment? I talked to my dermatologist last week telling her that I was going to come to this conference, and she said, of course, I don't have time. She's not only a physician with her own practice, she just opened up a second practice. She has an app store where she gives personalized dermatological advice to clients and tells them what products to buy. She is actually a contributor, an editorial contributor to our site as well, and is also the leading expert on our local news channel. She also has 2 kids. I'm not entirely sure how she has time to sleep. So it's a tall order to get her attention, right? The Journal of Medical Associates actually released an article a little bit ago saying that for general practitioners to stay up to date, if they were epidemiologically trained to read journal articles, it would take them 630 hours a month to stay on top of things. There's only 720 hours in a month. But that's the expectation, that's the amount of content we're expecting them to stay on top of. So with that, now that we understand them, let's maybe see what they are doing online. How can we take advantage of the time that we do have with them and make sure it's delivered in the right way, right? We have something that we're developing that will enable that kind of real-time access into what doctors are doing. Again, if you only have a couple minutes with them, let's get it in the format that they want to see it in. With all of our sites, with all of our languages that we publish in, we have hundreds of millions of data points that are pulling all of this in. And all of it's tagged. As a publisher, obviously, we've invested heavily into making sure that it's tagged as a video. It's tagged as not only breast cancer, but HR-positive breast cancer. It's also tagged with any other related conditions. Is it a slideshow? Does it have any interactivity in it? Is it CME? All of these are elements that we can pull the data on and then tell a story on how physicians are really interacting with content, what they really want to see. And so that can really give us some real-time insights into how we should approach our doctors. I'll give you an example of what this looks like, because we pulled this recently. We looked at top 8 countries. I only put these 3 on here because it gets really busy really fast. But we just looked at what articles they're reading, right? So a little bit of a simple analysis. What articles are they reading in these key countries? I think what's interesting is you see a lot of similarities, right? Neurologists who are reading multiple sclerosis content, by and large, the top article was top medications most often linked to headache. So you see a lot of similarities. I think what's interesting is when you really look at it, you start to see some nuances. In the UK, for example, the most popular content were these Fast 5 quizzes. It's interactive programming or test and teach modules. That's what the UK physicians are going to when they want to read about multiple sclerosis. In Italy, it's patient cases. That's at the top of the list. So when you're looking at an audience now, we're engaging in this in different ways. It's smart to be able to consider how can I deliver them different content in different ways to reflect what they're actually interested in and what they're engaging in. So the next is really identifying your audience. Sometimes it's not just saying, I want hemoncs in these specific countries. Sometimes we do want to go a little bit deeper. Again, with all of this data at our fingertips across all of these sites, across all of the campaigns that we execute, there's additional data that we can pull. Which users are most likely to open that email? Which users are most likely to engage in video? What of them are reading text more often? Are they participating in CME? All of these are variables that we can integrate using our machine learning technology to create an audience that is reflective of not only the content that we're trying to deliver, but what they're interested in as well. And I think there are 3 ways that we use this most often. One is to find the most appropriate target audience, right? I think that's most appropriate when you're talking about rare diseases that may not have a single specialty that are treating them, right? What if you need to reach all the potential specialists, nurses, that may be interacting with that patient before they're even diagnosed? Items like machine learning can pull together all those different discrete variables that can identify the types of doctors who may be seeing those patients pre-diagnosis to then create that machine learning audience for you to use to target them. The other way is where you want to create those segments. I know a lot of people have personas in their segments already created, but a lot of brands don't. And so this is an example of what we've used to create those. And I think a lot of this is what we talked about. It's demographics, it's what they're reading and what they're engaging in. But it can also be done in different ways using prescribing data. Now, obviously in the global marketplace, it's really difficult to do that. What we do have is a very robust US business that uses this clinical prescribing and diagnosing data heavily on a daily basis. So what we've done for a few people when they're open to the idea is create what we call lookalike audiences. So if you identify the high prescribers and even the lower prescribers, maybe mid-tier prescribers in the US, what are those people doing online that mimics in a very high probability the way users in certain countries or in a region are doing online, so that you can create that like-to-like audience. So that's one way you can segment. If you have defined personas already, usually those are defined on your own personal ecosystems, right? So how do you amortize those investments into creating those personas and using them with other platforms. And this is what we've done with people who already have those personas defined and want to execute them in a similar way on other platforms, which is of course smart because I'm going to talk about making it consistent, right? So if you're marketing to personas within your own branded ecosystem, of course you want to continue that outside of it as well. Now that we have all that together, before you even start a campaign, you want to utilize those principles of learning. I think a lot of this is intuitive, and there's nothing shocking here. You want to make sure you have scale and frequency. You want to make sure that you're reaching as many of the qualified physicians as possible, as many times as possible, again, in a respectful way. You want to make sure you have multiple content formats included, and that's important, and I'll explain why in a second. You want to use multiple engagement channels. It's not enough to just reach them one time over and over and over again with the same thing. And you want to make sure that you're using some intelligent targeting or triggering. We use that same kind of machine learning and a unified marketing orchestration platform to trigger content based on what a user may have indicated they're interested in or is actively doing on site right now. And that kind of triggering automation, actually we see a 3x increase in engagements when you use that kind of triggering. When you put that all together, you can see a 43% increase in intent to prescribe after the campaign is done. So they really do build collectively on each other. And it makes sense. I remember when I was in grad school, I walked into my immunology class, and I have never felt so out of my depth in my entire life. I had to change the entire way that I studied. I used to just read stuff, right? Not anymore. I had to transcribe it, record it, transcribe it, then read it, then listen to it again, transcribe it again. Those different formats and those different experiences really led to a different learning experience. And it's no different with physicians and how they learn. So then, like I said, you want to bring the story to them. We've established that they're busy. I think that's no surprise. So how do you do that? The way we do that as a publisher is using our own proprietary unified marketing orchestration program called Artemis. And this is something that can trigger based off a single action. It can trigger multiple content formats off a single action, and it can continuously learn and adjust. So if all of a sudden a physician starts to surprise us, maybe before they wanted that interactive content, but now they've leaned more towards text, we can adjust and change the way we're delivering to them. What if they really want to experience things in a different speed than we're offering to, right? So this is an example with branded tactics, but we use these same kind of principles in our editorial delivery as well. I watch Succession. Kills me that I have to wait every week to watch a new episode. I'd much rather sit down and watch them all at once. Our users, where we Succession, would be able to do that with accelerated engagement options. So instead of waiting maybe 6 months to see that entire story that you've worked to pull together with all of these different segments, you could maybe do it in approximately 4 weeks. For those who aren't as eager to participate, we can also adjust. We can give them multiple options to re-engage. If they're not participating in certain ways, maybe we want to approach them in a different way, right? Giving them multiple options always pays off. Right? And how does it pay off? Well, we see that when we give the option for our users to accelerate through a program, whether that be an editorial video series or an actual branded campaign, 60% of them will choose to accelerate through that journey. That tells me we've been too slow this whole time in delivering content, right? They want it, and they want it now. You can see that the rest of the strategies that we're employing are also really effective in delivering that information. Here's what that looks like when you put it all together, right? These are the different segments. You can imagine that these could be individual users as well, with each of those journeys looking different and each of them having the opportunity to go through those journeys not only at their own speed, but have those journeys be customized for them based on what they really like. It's making sure it's consistent. How do we do that? The way we do that for our users as a publisher is making sure that no matter where they are on our network, there are certain key things that are going to stay the same, right? We're always going to have a similar navigation so that users will always know how to get to the next article. They will always know how to navigate through that video and see the next one in the series because it's a consistent experience, whether or not they're on Caliendo reading news in German or whether or not they've gone to Univatus to read something in German. The experience will be the same in terms of the user experience, right? Not the content, but the user experience. I think what's interesting is that I think we all know doctors are on our platforms. They're on multiple publishing platforms. They're on your platforms. But they also spend a lot of time online, not on our platforms. So what do you do when they're not there, right? When they're checking finances, when they're checking sports scores, or when they're just messing around and trying not to think, right? What do you do when there's non-endemic platforms? We're experimenting with this as a publisher and starting to experiment with it with commercial clients as well by reaching them on these other websites where they are spending a lot more of their time using a proprietary DSP platform called PulsePoint, if any of you have heard it. But it's showing us the value of reaching them, reaching that doctor. We know they're a doctor, known doctor, but they're checking their sports scores. We can reach them now in that moment as well to, again, continue that consistent journey, meet them where they are, and really start closing the loop on these journeys and these omnichannel strategies that we've been talking about. It's interesting, our own omnichannel strategy that we do as a publisher has led to 40% increased engagement just last year alone. So we, as a publisher, know it works, and we're trying to pass that off to our clients as well. The last thing is to make it interesting. I'll make this super fast. But since we've been executing branded campaigns over the past 25 years or so, there are some things we learned about how to frame our commercial interactions in a way that customers will actually take that next click, right? They'll actually open that email, they'll watch that whole video, they'll make that action that we want them to take, right? There are simple things like with email subject lines. Specialists respond to different keywords than general practitioners do. When you're talking about emails, images is actually not your friend. When you are prioritizing click-through rates on emails, images is not something you want to invest heavily in, right? If you think about it, when you open an email and you just see an image, I don't know what I'm supposed to learn. What am I supposed to get out of that? So we actually recommend you remove images if click-through rate is important to you. For video, that's also a popular medium. It's great to make sure that if you have a peer-led or KOL-led video, which we know are always the most popular with physicians, you want to make sure they say, "Hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and this is what I'm going to talk about today." So it's boom, 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 right away. What do they expect to learn from that video? Mechanism of action videos are also very popular. So in the end, we know this works. It works for us as a publisher to personalize and deliver the content in these innovative ways, and it works for our clients as well. We see a 43% increase in intent to prescribe when you pull this all together for our commercial clients. But even just for our editorial content as a publisher, 99% report that they have increased confidence in their knowledge of these disease states when they're reading this content in this way. So I hope you all have found this helpful. Again, I appreciate you all staying. I hope you enjoy the rest of Dubrovnik. And I am, for real, the last person talking now.